onto this now. The basic objective of charting a way forward for Eskom must be to ensure reliable and affordable electricity supply. That's the view of a senior economics lecturer at the University of Johannesburg, that's Sean Muller. He says planned solutions must not undermine the stability of public finances. He's my guest this morning. Mr. Muller, thank you very much for your time. Those two elements right at the top of that intro, reliable power supply, but that's also affordable. These two companies that we are leading with today, this morning, Samanco, Chrome and Glencore, they're using those issues at the top there as their excuse for why they're possibly going to retrench people. Is that what you're talking about?
Partly. Certainly, there's serious concern about the impact of Eskom on the economy. There have been various estimates of that. There's no doubt that it has a negative effect on the economy if we don't have reliable power supply. And it's important to remember that South Africa, for a very long time, has had relatively good power supply, and in the past it was quite cheap, in fact too cheap. But it has been a big comparative advantage for us, particularly to other developing countries and other countries on the continent. So maintaining the reliability of that supply, or getting back to some level of reliability, is really crucial. But at the same time, we need to do that in a way that protects Eskom's integrity as an enterprise. And the reason is that Eskom is everybody's problem. Eskom has borrowed on the behalf of all South African citizens, so it's not something that can just be left to collapse on its own.
We saw earlier this month the fight between Eskom and energy regulator NERSA taking each other to court over the issue of tariffs. Eskom saying, for us, this is a solvency issue. How does it do that without us questioning it about the corruption issues that have plagued that institution?
Right, so it's a very tricky issue. People say that because there's clearly been corruption at Eskom, there's clearly been mismanagement, and in addition to those things, there was bad decision-making by the government in the past in terms of the time it took to bring new infrastructure online. And Medupi and Kusile and the cost overruns there are a consequence of that. But the thing is that that is in the past, and that although Eskom should try and recoup money from people who stole it, they should try and get suppliers to deliver the things that they said they were going to do, but leaving that aside, Eskom still has holes in its finances that need to be plugged. Now, the very interesting thing about that court case is that it's about support that was given to Eskom by the National Treasury to try and bail them out. And then NERSA, the regulator, came along and said, well, we're going to deduct that from essentially our tariff award because we don't think you've earned that. Now, from a regulator's point of view, that makes sense. But from a national point of view, it doesn't make sense. Because, as I've said, Eskom is everybody's problem. Yeah. So if Eskom has a hole in its finances, it is going to have to be plugged. Either it can be plugged through electricity tariffs, or it can be plugged through government transfers, i.e. taxes on citizens. Right? So that court case, it's a lose-lose for citizens, because you're spending public money, you're financing a court case, you're financing Eskom, you're financing the regulator to fight each other, and one way or another, as a citizen, you're going to pay.
Let me ask you this question. You also say that planned solutions at Eskom must not undermine the stability of public finances. I have my own ideas about what you possibly mean by that, but let me give you the first chance to spell out exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so let me try and use the analogy that we used in the article that you've been referencing, which is that imagine that you've bought a car from a dealership, okay, and you've borrowed money from a bank to buy that car. Now, and you use that car to get to work, right, so to earn an income. Now that car stops working, or it starts working unreliably. You can't take it back because the dealership is closed. You go to somebody for advice, and they say, oh, well, it's easy. Just buy a new car. And in fact, while you're buying that new car, buy one that's environmentally friendly. You know, it uses less fuel, it'll cost you less. You say, well, that's great. The problem is that I borrowed to buy this car, and I have to repay the bank on this car. So if I buy a new car, I'm going to increase my costs. I'm going to make my financial situation worse. That's the issue with Eskom. So people are coming along and they're saying, oh, well, why don't you just commission more renewable energy? Well, because you've already paid for Medupi and Kusile. You're still borrowing, in fact, to pay for those power plants, and other power plants are not functioning as they should. So you're paying the bank, essentially, for these things that are not working as they should. So if somebody to come along and say, oh, well, just buy a new car, just commission new energy capacity, that doesn't address the financial side of the problem. And so our argument has been that a lot of the problems with solutions that are being put on the table is that they don't look at the financial side. They only look at the operational side. And with Eskom, there's two crises, an operational one and a financial one.
Now, we have heard from the institution and, of course, more recently from the governing party that while Eskom deals with the issue of load shedding, which means that they might have to put some of the coal-fired power stations out of service while they're being maintained, there is going to be the introduction of independent power producers. How is that going to affect the performance of the economy? And can those independent power producers be relied upon to provide consistent power supply?
Well, so I think the first thing to note is what you're saying about the importance of maintenance. So for maybe a decade now, not enough maintenance has been done for various reasons, starting, for example, with the World Cup. Right? So maintenance was postponed on these power plants, which is one of the reasons they're not functioning as they should. So space needs to be created for that to happen. That might even require load shedding for a sustained period of time at level 1 or level 2 to create that space for Eskom. Hopefully not, but it might be necessary. Okay? Then the issue comes in of the ANC statement. The problem with the ANC statement is, like all these other solutions, it says nothing about finances. It says nothing about the financial implications for Eskom of decentralized power generation. So decentralized power generation means big businesses, maybe like these mines, can produce their own power. In many ways, that's great, and that's an important part of future energy systems. But right now, what it means is that when there isn't that level of pressure on Eskom that would create load shedding, Eskom's losing revenue. Okay, and it's losing revenue on power plants it's already invested in. And that's going to become the public's problem. So the businesses can protect themselves by creating their own power, but Eskom, because it's not getting their revenue, will have to find that money elsewhere, which means higher electricity tariffs for other users or more bailouts. So as I say, and I think part of the problem also is that the business press in particular has put a lot of pressure on the ANC around this commissioning of new renewable energy. And I think that's inappropriate because they haven't acknowledged the financial implications for Eskom. So sure, renewable power is very important. It's important for the environment, as we know, because of global warming. It's important for international treaties that we've signed. It's also relatively easy to scale up quite quickly. Yeah. Okay, so unlike a nuclear plant or a coal plant that would take many years to build, renewable energy can be brought online quite quickly. But the problem is the financial side. And the ANC, in that statement that they released, haven't dealt with that at all.
Shaun Muller, thank you very much for your insights. He's a senior economics lecturer at the University of Johannesburg.